I remember when he got the words out, their life lighting him. And then I yelled even more. Why? Like.
All right, thank you for coming and visiting with me. This is fun. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, your interests, work, hobbies?
So, my name is Samantha Wiese. I'm 30.
Wow, way to go.
I know.
Not very many will say
and
your
I
age.
still feel like a baby. So when I say that, I'm like, gosh, I remember when my mom turned 30. Anyway.
Yeah.
2 boys, 2 and 4, married for, this year will be 7 years. And him and I were together forever before that. So forever. I was 15, he was 17. And I know how silly that sounds. Like, I think people think like, oh, you were just dating, you know. No. And I knew it's one of those things that in my soul, I knew he was it. So here we are, 2 beautiful boys, 3rd on the way in August. I do hair. I actually, just over a year ago, bought the salon. So that was horrible timing, obviously COVID, and but we're okay. It's rough still day to day. That closure was hard. Not knowing how long the closure was going to be. It was just a month, thank goodness. Which a month felt like eternity. But I was ready for a break. Mentally, COVID was hard for me anyway. But yeah, we're making it. Obviously, I joke all the time that we're surviving, not thriving. But it really is doing well. So
good.
Thankful for that.
That's good. So. Yeah, Sammy's responsible for all my good hair days.
Yes. You just have good hair.
Thanks to you. Okay, so take us back. You said you and your husband had known each other since you were young and been together and you knew. So kind of share a little bit how your relationship developed and to the newlyweds stage and kind of set us up.
Yeah, so high school, mutual friends were dating, and I kind of was always the third wheel with the friend and the boyfriend, and then the boyfriend always had a friend that like rotated, and one day it was Brian, and that was that, and I just knew he was different. He was just a special soul for sure. He's a pain in my butt, but he's definitely the best. I don't know, the best guy for sure. So we just dated all through high school. He was a year older than me, so through high school, dated after. He always worked. He worked from the time he was like 15, 14. I went to hair school and graduated high school. We bought our first home, I think that was in 2012. And I wasn't going to move in with him. And then he's like, well, why did I buy this house if you're not going to move in? Anyway, so I moved in unknowingly. That wasn't the plan, but I'm so glad we did, because that time was special. We weren't married, but we just were kids, we just got to play, and we didn't have kids, we didn't have a dog, we just literally could drop and go do whatever, not come home if we didn't want to, and so we got married in 2014, 2013, we got engaged, and so yeah, a year of planning, and got married August 2014, and it sounds silly because we'd been together for so long, but there really was a change. There really was this unspoken, like, we've always been solid. Like, we've always just been just good. Anyway, so after we got married, just kind of cloud nine. Just those years were the best. So fun. There was a lot of pressure for a long time to get married from friends and, society. You've been together for so long and you're 22, why aren't you married? But I'm so glad we didn't. It was meant to be when it was, and obviously as we go more into the story, it's a puzzle that all just comes together for me. So
okay, so take us to when he had an accident. Will you share how you first heard about that?
Yeah, so I could tell this story 100 different ways. So he went to the sand dunes with a group of friends. It was actually his brother's friends, but when you have a brother that you're close with, his friends become your brothers too. So there was 5 of them. They were going to go to St. Anthony's Sand Dunes for just an overnighter, just the guys. So they go, and I joke about this now. It took them forever to get out of town. Like, I think they left the house at 6, and I don't think they actually hit the road until 8. He kept calling me, and I'm like, where are you? Well, we're at the grocery store. We're at the auto parts store. I'm like, you guys drive me crazy. Obviously, there's not a woman with you, but... So anyway, yeah, it had taken them forever to get going, and then I had to work for a couple of hours, and then I was supposed to actually go up to... My family has property up on Sunridge where they're building a cabin. I was supposed to go up there after I got off, have lunch, and do what I could to help on the cabin for just a little bit, and then I was going to come home and go to a friend's. I went to work and just had this feeling of I'm tired, I'm just going to go home. It's another one of those things that was a blessing that I didn't even know, you know, because I would have been out of service, and who knows the time that would have gone by. So I kind of quit hearing from him, I think, around 11, and I knew they would lose service. I got home from work, and my house was an absolute disaster, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to lay down. I just want to take a nap. So I laid down, and Angie, the second I got comfortable, the phone rang, and he's in my phone as Christopher, my brother-in-law. And it said Christopher, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, either something, you know, more delays, more bumps in the road, or something's wrong. Why would Brian be calling me from Chris's phone? And kind of this moment of clarity, like things are about to get crazy, but you need to answer this, because wherever they are, they probably don't have service. So the fact that you're getting, anyway, so something told me you need to answer. So I did, and it was my brother-in-law. It wasn't Brian like I thought it would be, and I've never heard his voice like that in the 15 years that I've known him, just broken. And he just said, Sammy, you need to get to Idaho Falls. Brian's hurt. And I was mad at him. I was yelling at him. I said, what do you mean? What happened? And I'm yelling. Poor him. He kind of was my punching bag through a lot of this, but bless his heart. I think that's why he was there and not me. But I wanted all the answers right then. Tell me what happened. And he said, I can't tell you. And I remember when he got the words out, they're life-flighting him. And then I yelled even more. Why? Like, what is wrong and what happened? And just like that, he was gone. He just said, I don't have answers. Just get in your car. You need to get to Idaho Falls. So, and he was gone.
So did you get in the car right away?
Yeah, it was afternoon. So they had just gotten there.
Okay.
It was their first ride. They were probably 10 minutes off the trailer. So it was like 1. I was thinking about this last night. Something about 119 is standing out to me. I think that's about when he called me the first time. So I had this moment of scramble. What do I do? Do I pack a bag? Do I, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to take. So I grabbed a jacket, slipped on my flip-flops, and just left. So I had my wallet, I had my flip-flops, my jacket, and I just got on the phone. And in a rotation, mom, dad, stepdad, I'm calling and calling and calling. Because I know my mom, she's going to kick my butt if I get in the car and drive up there by myself. But if you don't answer and if you don't get with me right now, I'm leaving. I'm like, okay, I just got to go. I got to go. And
so how long of a drive is it from here to Idaho Falls?
So Idaho Falls, I think it should be like 3 hours. I think 2.5, 3 hours. We got there about 3. So we got there, I think it was like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. So as I'm making these phone calls, nobody's answering. And I'm getting mad. Like, you 3, I'm your whole world. What are you doing and why aren't you answering your phone? My dad was on his way to a wedding. I knew that. But as far as I knew, my mom and stepdad were just home, and I come to find out later what had happened. They were all trying to call me back at the same time, and you know how phones are. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I finally got through to my mom, and I'm yelling and screaming, and she did to me what I did to my brother. What happened? Mm-hmm. You know, and she's yelling at me, and I just said, I don't know, but I'm going. So, and she said what I knew she would. You are not driving up there. Get here. I'm going to get dressed. I'll go with you. So, and she's right on the way. So it worked out perfect. So I remember pulling in the driveway and made a couple phone calls on my way out there. And one of my sister-in-laws being one of them, and this is about when it hits me that his parents are in Alaska. I mean, obviously I knew they were gone, but just in my list of people I needed to call, it hit me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I can't be the one to call them. Like, I didn't want to call them and make them come home if this was, you know, you hear people being life-flighted for broken legs or something, just because they can't, you know, geological reasons, they can't get down. And I just thought, I don't want to be the one to break this to them and make their decision for them. And anyway, so I got to my mom's, and I remember jumping out of the car and running into my mom's house and hitting the floor. And by this time I was hearing back from my dad, and probably weren't there 30 seconds before we just got on the road. Luckily my mother is one of those people who lives she lives with her car at a full tank all the time. I don't do that. I should probably learn from that, but I don't. So anyway, we were able to just get in the car and just go.
What was that drive like?
Physically painful. Physically painful. I remember this pain in my shoulders. And I'm anxiety prone anyway, and there were a couple of times that she just looked at me and said, I need you to do your best to just breathe. She's like, we're going to have another emergency here if you don't, you know, kind of just breathe. I know this is hard, but we got to just get there. That's all we can do. So lots of phone calls, lots of texts. And the irony, I had, not to backtrack, I had this feeling before. I had this vision of me needing to contact people. And because we were newlyweds, that his groomsmen were at the top of this list, and I had planned this. I had planned this for years. I had this vision. So I put it in action and called all of them, and they handled it well. They were just what I needed. I just kept saying, I don't know what I was thinking, but I just kept saying, don't come, let me find out what's going on. I just wanted you to know. And they all just kept saying, okay. Little did I know, they were right behind me, you know. Within the next couple hours after I got there, friends just started pouring in, and I needed that, and I didn't know. So every face that I saw, I just was so thankful. Thankful that they didn't listen to me, because I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. But I have this thing, and it comes from my mother and her family, where you don't want to be a bother to people. You don't want to put people out, and it all goes out the window when something like that happens. And I wish I would have not understood, because obviously I understand that, but when they said I'm coming, I wish I would have just said okay, you know, because that I needed them more than I realized.
So they were a big support and help.
Absolutely. And my family, I think back to pre-wedding. You know, I come from a divorced family, and we were doing very well, but it was ugly for a lot of years. It was really hard for my parents to get along and be together, and they would text and communicate through, like, high school if I was having a hard time or something, but very minimal. And it kind of felt, Angie, like when I got married, and not just among my parents, but other strained relationships everybody at my wedding just got along. It was heaven for me.
That's nice.
To look across the room and see people talking that I never thought would be able to have a conversation, and it was what I needed. And I have to think that was because I needed them all to be together a year later, you know. So this was August 15th. So I got married August 22nd in 14. He wrecked August 15th. So 51 weeks to the day. August 15th, 2015. So that right there is probably the biggest that impacted me, for them to all be together, for my parents to be able to sit in a waiting room for 18 hours a day with me, and like I said, not just my parents, but other relationships too, because that's what it was. It was waiting, and you know, it got to the point where we could go in and see him. And
so when you first arrived, could you run in and see him, or what?
No, so he was actually in surgery. My brother-in-law loses service. He finally calls me when he gets really close to the hospital, and the friends that were with him, what a blessing too. I think about that all the time. One of them is an ICU nurse, and he will never claim that he did anything helpful, but I know different. I know that he was there for a reason. The whole group was there for a purpose. And he had told me where he was. He had told me he was in surgery. He actually called me. I think we were probably like a half hour, 45 minutes away when he made it there, and basically gave me this laundry list of things. And naive me, before I knew everything that was wrong, I remember thinking, I would rather he break every bone in his body, just don't be his head. Just knowing him, and if he can't live the way he wants to live, he wouldn't want to be here, you know. And the fear of that, the fear of a decision. And now I see how naive that was, especially after losing a friend to opioid addiction and abuse. Pain is a different monster to deal with, and we were so lucky he didn't have a lot of pain. So anyway, I remember thinking, I don't care if you're cast from head to toe, but please don't be your head.
So what were his injuries?
So when my brother-in-law got to the hospital, and I guess they had him wait for a minute, and then they called him into a room by himself. And that kills me. That, I know HIPAA, I know, but gosh. So he thought he was walking into this room to be told his brother's dead, and brain injury, multiple skull fractures, lacerated liver, lacerated spleen, ruptured artery to the bowel, a couple broken ribs, lots of fluid in his lungs. Come to find out, his elbow, he did do something to his elbow, we think. We never actually really got to the bottom of that, but yeah, so mostly internal.
So when he was in surgery when you arrived, what was the surgery for?
So he was in surgery, basically to put, they call it a bolt in the brain, to help with the swelling, repair the internal injuries. Spleen will heal itself, liver will heal itself. So lots of internal bleeding that they had to get on top of, and then repair the artery and remove some of his bowel.
So they did all of that in that surgery? Wow.
Yep. So earlier I had called the hospital when I was worried that maybe they might transfer him. I called the hospital and I just said, I just need to know if he's going to stay there. I don't want to get there and have to turn around. And the guy on the phone was so patient, and I wish I would have followed that avenue more, but he just said, I can't tell you a name, but call me back in 10 minutes. I've got somebody coming in and I'll know more. So I called him back and he said, yes, this is him and he's not going anywhere. So just drive safe and get here. And he couldn't tell me anything, obviously. But so that was a relief to know that that's where we were headed and that he would be there. I think the major internal thing was the bleeding, the artery to the bowel, removing the bowel, a portion of it, and I can't remember how much. It sounded like a lot when they told me. I was like, holy cow, but we have so much of it that it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, so I think he got out of surgery. I think I got there around 3 and just found this room of boys, broken boys. And I just had 100 questions, and it's not anything that they can explain. So the dunes up north are different from the dunes that we're used to in that they're bigger, so that's great. And then where we're used to going, a lot of them will round on top, so you can come up top and turn around. From what I understand, a lot of them at St. Anthony, they just cap, and they change with the weather, the wind. And no one really quite knows what. I guess 2 of them took off up the hill on 4-wheelers, and one friend turned and watched him just go over. So, and it drives him crazy that he doesn't know what he was thinking. Visibility was horrible. There were a lot of forest fires at that time. So it drives him nuts to not know what he was thinking and why he did what he did. And so finding them in the hospital, that was, I mean, it felt good because my brother-in-law, I was just so glad that he wasn't alone.
So tell me when you first saw Brian.
So the doctor came in, it had been a few hours, I think it was 5 or 6 when the doctor came in. And by this time there's at least a dozen people in this waiting room, our people. And I just kind of felt like a kid waiting for my punishment to be read to me or something. The doctor he said, am I free to speak openly? And I just said, yeah, because I'm going to need all these ears to help me, understand what's happening. And so he just walked me through, liver and spleen will be fine. They'll heal on their own. Bleeding we're on top of. Everything internally, you should be good. Obviously it needs to heal, but it's the least of our worries. And the brain, it's not anything I have answers for. 48 hours is kind of the telling point. That's when the swelling peaks, and if any more damage is going to be caused, it's probably at that point. So it was just a waiting game, and obviously I had a million questions, but I got the gist that he doesn't have answers. It's just going to be time. The speed, how fast they were able to get to him and get him in surgery was a blessing.
So tell me how you coped through those 48 hours. There's a lot of unknowns and you're just hoping for the best. What did you do?
Yeah, so after seeing him, so the doctor comes in and explains everything. I just kind of feel not necessarily peace, but just like, okay, let's just see what happens. And he's a machine. Kid's already been through more than a lot of 27-year-olds have been through medically. And so we go in to see him, and it was me and his brother and his twin sister going at the same time. And Chris, I'll never forget, Chris just marched in there. He just needed to get there. And I stopped outside the door and I could see him and I just broke. He looked horrible. I'll never forget that sight. And his sister just helped me, and I just said, I can't. She said, you have to. You don't have a choice. You have to. He needs you. And that was kind of it. So we just walked in, and there's this gauze over, probably 10 inches of his stomach. He's got this bolt sticking out of his head. Already has a black eye. They had to shave he needed a haircut when this happened, but they had to shave his head where they put the bolt in. He's got blood coming out of his ears, coming out of his nose, all over his beard, dried blood. And one of the first things I noticed, we joke about this, he always sleeps with a leg popped. His legs are never straight when he sleeps. One of them is, but one of them's always popped. And he's laying there in this bed and he's got a leg popped. And I'm like, he's in there. I know he's in there. He's going to be okay. It just was this moment of, like, it was rough to see him that way, but he is my husband. He's in there. And the nurse that he had right then, she kept trying to straighten him out. She actually Velcroed him at one point because she explained that straight is good for a brain injury, to have them just lay straight. So she kept trying to straighten him out. And this is hours in, and he keeps popping a leg out. She'd get one straight and he'd pop the other one. And I just thought,
that's funny. Good
luck with that lady. Like, he's determined. That's my husband for sure. Hard.
Yeah.
Next couple of hours. And then one of the friends that had come up and my brother-in-law gave us both a priesthood blessing. And we're not active in the church. We are both LDS. We both have been active in the past. We just aren't currently, and we weren't at that time. But it was something that not only did my brother feel strong about, but I'm like, yes, do it. Every surgery he's ever had, he's been blessed before, and there's just something to be said about the peace that brings. And so my mom and dad were in the room. My dad was holding Brian's hand when they started with me. They did my blessing first. And just instant, just peace. Just not, like, obviously this isn't going to be easy, but he's going to be okay. He's a machine. He's an animal. He will get through this. It's going to be tough, but he's going to do it. And when they said my name, they said Samantha Wiese. My dad was holding Brian's hand, and Brian squeezed my dad's hand when they said my name, and probably coincidental, but not to me.
He was aware
at all. And at this point, so people say, was he in a coma? And no, obviously he had a ton of medication in him because of the surgery. But with a brain injury, they try and get that off. They try and back that off as soon as they can. To monitor, to see where you're at, because the longer you go without it, or the longer you go on medication and stuff, it just kind of fogs everything, and it just can take longer. And so yes, he was very drugged, very heavily medicated, but they quickly started weaning that off, and I swear that's why he did so well. So anyway, as heavily medicated as he is, and he's squeezing and he's popping his leg. And
how long was he kind of in an unconscious state? How long until he woke up?
It's so hard for me to remember. He would open his eyes here and then. Before we went in, they told us, you need to keep your volume down. 2 of you in there at a time. Keep your volume down. They showed us the little number on the screen that's the brain pressure. They said we don't want that to climb. That needs to stay low. So no rubbing. If you want to hold his hand, that's fine. But just don't stimulate him.
Wow.
So they tell us all this. And I can't remember when this doctor came in. It might have been that night. It might have been the next morning. But this little cowboy doctor with this crazy hair and his boots, he'd come in and yells at him.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought we weren't supposed to do that. Yeah. Obviously, he's a doctor. He knows what he's doing. But it was to get a reaction. It was to see what we would get. And he opened his eyes, and very short-lived. And he couldn't do any of the hand squeezes or anything like that. But just a little flinch with the eyes. And so Angie, I can't really remember. I would say a week, maybe.
A week.
Less than a week. Because 6 days. It was 6 days before he really was eyes open and trying to talk to you.
Right. And so tell us about those next few weeks and months and what his recovery was like.
9 days in the ICU, 3 to 4 days in kind of the intermediate care up there. So the staff there was, he had one nurse that was really hard for me to deal with. She just didn't, the above and beyond for him just wasn't there. She was just there doing her job. And but other than that, we were blessed, so blessed with the staff. And you know, as time goes on and he's healing, so 6 days he started talking. His nurse that night, so he had a breathing tube at this point, and he kept reaching for it. And so while I was there, the nurse tied him down. And he's like, I just hate doing that. I just want him comfortable, but I also don't want him to pull it out, because if he pulls it out and he's not ready, then they have to put it back, and that's a job, you know, and you don't want to have to put it back in once it comes out. And there's a process to taking it out. There's a balloon at the bottom of it that they deflate that tears up the esophagus if you don't deflate it. Anyway, he calls me about 5:30. The nurse did, in the morning, the next morning. And he said, tried to give you as much sleep as I could. Everything's okay, but he's ripped his breathing tube out. And in my head, I'm like, guy, I told you. I knew he was going for it, you know. So I kind of had to laugh, but it wasn't funny. It was scary. But it was just that much harder. He had to work to keep it out. And so kind of a blessing. Because then his exercises, he had to just kick it up. So this nurse says, he's got his breathing tube out and he's talking, and we need you to come up here and keep these wheels turning. So I got up there, and he's saying very little, but it's just this little baby voice. I'll never forget that sweet little, just like a little boy. And the doctor came in and asking him a few questions, and he's talking to these doctors like he's trying to pass a test. And he's just determined. He's just, I'm going to say the right answer, because that's what I need to do, you know. The doctor at one point said, do you know, he pointed at me, he said, who's this pretty lady right here? And Brian looked at me, and I was nervous. I was so nervous. I knew he knew who I was, but I was nervous for what his answer was going to be. And he said, Samantha Ray, my wife, kind of like with a question mark at the end. And my heart just, this is my anniversary, by the way. So my heart just, I was so happy. I can't explain that feeling. Just, and the way he said Samantha Ray, I'm like, he thinks the doctor wanted like a full, like, legal answer, you know, Samantha Ray, my wife. So yet again, another moment that I'm like, he's going to be okay. This is going to be hard, but he's going to be okay. So that was 6 days later, lots of therapy in the ICU and the intermediate care floor in those days before we come home. And then we determined that he would go through an inpatient rehab center. And we got the okay to come home to do that. So they transported him, and he was there for 2 weeks too. So that was a very hard adjustment. We got there on a Sunday.
Did you drive him down?
They transported him, so it was like a medical van, basically. So they could roll the hospital bed in, and I got to ride with him. And oh, he was just so tired, and that went on for months. That's a brain injury thing. They just could sleep me for 20 hours a day, and we got there, and it was during a mealtime there, so the staff wasn't there to welcome us like I think they normally would have been. This new environment, I haven't been home for 2 weeks. That next couple hours was tough. And they wanted him to eat right then and there, and he hadn't been eating a lot, you know. He'd been getting nutrition, but anyway, it was just hard. There should have been somebody there to kind of walk us through everything, and there just wasn't. I ended up leaving because I was not handling it well. Went home and showered, and going home was hard. My friends had cleaned my house, and I think there were probably 4 or 5 people that showed up to mow my lawn, and it had already been done by somebody. Wow. I remember thinking, oh, that's so cool. Just something so silly. I don't care if the lawn doesn't get mowed, but people want to do what they can do, especially from afar. Anyway, so it was shortly after we got him to Utah, and I've told you, Angie, I had this intuition that I was pregnant. And I had just been putting off testing, but I knew deep in my in my heart, I knew. So sure enough, a few days after coming home, I tested, and yeah, pregnant. And I can't explain the joy that I felt, and fear, you know, but overall just joy. And then a lot of, like, what do I do now? You know, do I tell him? He's still very, he's not healed. He's still recovering, you know, and so it's like, if I tell him, will he even remember? Will I have to tell him every day? So it's just kind of a day-by-day thing. Probably at least, I don't know, probably 10 days that I kind of kept that to myself, and I'm all about the surprise. I envisioned, you know, a couple months down the road, maybe a month, or maybe when we get him home, I didn't know. I just envisioned being able to tell our families about this one more miracle that came not from this, but, and then finally just felt like the time was right to tell him. So I recorded it, and it's hard to watch. It wasn't a good conversation. He wasn't mad, he wasn't upset, he just kind of, granted, brain injury patients, they kind of have this I don't give a crap thing on their face, which wasn't the case. I knew that he did, but his exact words were, "Look at me, I can't be a dad." And I just said, I was able to explain to him the progress that I had seen him make and how far he had come. That 2 weeks ago he wasn't even walking, couldn't even talk, and that it was going to be okay, that this was a blessing. And his brother was on the way up to visit that night, and he had kids. He was the first one to have kids in the family, and I said, "Do you want to talk to him about it? Maybe he has some advice." And he just said, "No, let's just not tell anybody for a minute." And I was heartbroken with how that conversation went. I cried and cried and cried, just that he was feeling inadequate. And I remember we went to bed. I was sleeping up at the rehab center, which was hard. He didn't like me to leave at night, especially. So we got ready for bed, and he kind of mumbled under his breath. He just said, "You know what? It's going to be okay. I've got 9 months to get better. That means I've got 9 months to get it together and to heal." And I can't explain the peace and the relief that I felt hearing him say that, because that's exactly how I felt too. I've seen you make so much progress in 2 weeks. You're going to be just fine.
So tell us what kind of things that he was working on to
learn.
learn.
In rehab, they had him doing 3 hours of therapy a day. So there was speech, occupational, and physical. So walk, talk, just literally from the ground up, starting over. Occupational therapy I didn't fully understand before this happened. And in his situation, it was helping him just with daily skills, going to the bathroom, showering, brushing his teeth. Half of his face was numb still at this time. So it was really hard for him to get used to eating and stuff. He actually was on soft foods for a long time because they were worried that he would choke. Speech therapy, that's one thing that I have learned probably the most about. I used to think speech therapy was helping you learn how to talk, and my goodness, there's so much more to that, and it's fascinating to me. The cognitive development that goes into that, these silly little puzzles and things that you think you're doing that are actually carving those pathways back into your brain. And I would say that's probably where the most progress came from. Obviously physical and occupational, you need that too. But the speech therapy was just, that's a whole different ballgame, and it just was fascinating to watch him come back from that. So yeah, what it seemed like silly puzzles in speech therapy. Sudoku, they had him do a lot of Sudoku, and lots of talking through things, and puzzles and stacking, and just things that seem silly but are so big.
And how long was he in the rehab?
So he was an inpatient for 2 weeks. And then there was a big question of, okay, do we do home health? What's the next step? So I interviewed a couple home health companies, and both of them determined that home health was probably not the route to go, where he was otherwise healthy, where I could get him in the car, and he wasn't wheelchair bound or anything like that. Because home health would have been, I think it was an hour or 2 of therapy a week that we would have gotten. And so it just seemed like where he was getting 3 hours a day felt like a step backwards. And so we ended up doing outpatient therapy, and that was 6 hours a week, 3 hours or 2 hours of each therapy per week, and that was hard. Not only physically getting him there, so I was driving to sometimes more than 3 times a week. They would try and do 2 therapies in a day, but it didn't always work out that way, and there were days that he was tired, and overdoing it with something like that is not what they want to do. So, and we did therapy until mid-November, which is not very long for somebody who's been through what he's been through. But 6 hours a week, getting him to and from.
And I recall that, you couldn't leave him alone for a very long time.
No. So, the day he came home from rehab, obviously we were so happy. He had been saying for weeks, because he's now himself.
Okay.
Minus a filter or 2, which is a brain injury thing. And it was funny sometimes, and then I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
He just talked all the time, just take me home.
Yeah.
Just bring my truck up and put me in my truck and take me home. I'm so ready. And so to take him home was such a relief. They have the bell, the ring, and that day was hectic. I had to work in the morning, and while I was at work, I had started spotting, and was kind of like, I don't have time for this. And then I kind of just told myself that it's fine. Some people bleed in pregnancy. It's fine. I'm not going to think about this right now. This is a good day. It's just spotting. Yeah. So let's not overreact. He's a car guy. He's a truck guy. And he has this old 1974 Chevy truck that it was his first car. He had it, I think, when he was 14 or 15. I remember him driving it to school. I would be at the bus stop in 9th grade, and he would pass me in the shred Chevy. He didn't know who I was, but I knew who he was. I liked to tease him about that, but Chris went and got that, and so we took him home in his red truck, and they kind of had a discharge, I don't want to say orientation, but they had certain things they wanted to go over with you for his safety and yours, and he couldn't be left alone. He couldn't drive, obviously. He had a belt that he wore, just that you would hold on to behind him, just to kind of help keep him stable. I don't think we used that, but for 1 or 2 days after he got home. But a lot of that next few days was just sleeping, which was hard for me, but I understood at the same time. So we get home, I had my friend come take pictures, so I think there was probably 10 of us leaving the rehab center with him, and he rings the bell, and I think about that now, and I'm just like, it's such a big deal. To him it was silly, but to look back, he's like, that's cool that they do that. So we get him home, and there's probably a dozen people at my house to welcome him home, and they just sat in the living room and hung out with us for a little bit, and he fell asleep actually while they were there. But it was so good just to, like, yeah, we're home, but we still have this crew. We still have this group behind us. That day was great to have everybody there. And then everybody leaves. And I think they just felt like, you're home, let's give you your space. And I get it. I really do, but that's the most lonely I've ever felt. And they can't just be with me all day, but all he's doing is sleeping, and here I am, I haven't been home for longer than an hour and in 4 weeks, and so really just trying to keep busy. And I watched a lot of movies. Anyway, that night, so he slept on the couch for a few hours, and then I finally got him to bed, and I went to bed with him, and I got up to go to the bathroom, and there was blood, a lot of blood. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want to overreact, but I didn't want to underreact. When that happened in the night, I just cried. And I felt like a burden to him, but I kind of needed to know what he was thinking. And so I sat on the floor on his side of the bed, and I just said, do you remember that there's a baby? Do you remember that I'm pregnant? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, honey, I'm bleeding a lot. And he said, he kind of opened his eyes and he said, honey, that's not good. And I said, no, it's not. What do you think I should do? And here I am, I feel like I'm asking a child for advice. Because he's still just trying to live, you know, he's still just day by day. And I think back now and I'm like, call your mom, call your dad, you know, but again, I still am holding on to that surprise, that moment of...
So they didn't know? Your parents didn't know?
I didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew except Brian. And my mom was gone on a retreat that she does once a year. It's a big deal for her. She works all year for it. And she was heartbroken that it was on this weekend that he was coming home, but I just said, you need to go. You need a break from us. And it's such an uplifting thing for her. And I just thought, I can't call her home from that. So he came home on a Saturday, Sunday. Sunday's the big deal for that retreat. And I just thought, she needs to be able to do that. And so I didn't want to call her. And again, my dad, I just wanted everything to be okay. And just couldn't wait to tell him, you know, he's going to be a grandpa. And anyway, so I just went back to bed. And I decided that I would call my sister-in-law in the morning. My sister-in-law had 3 kids. And she's very just like internet savvy. Like she just knows everything. And so I'm like, I'll talk to her and maybe she can ease my mind. Maybe she can help me figure this out if I am overreacting. Anyway, so I called a friend and I just said, I gotta go for a little bit. Can you come sit with him? And he didn't even hesitate and just said, yeah, I'll be there. And so I went to talk to her and I said, so, you know how your friend thought that I was pregnant? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I am, but I'm bleeding. And so it was like this happy, sad. I just said, I don't know what to do. I came to you for advice. I don't know if I need to go to the hospital. I don't know what to do. And she just said, if it were me, I would just need to know. So let's just go. She said, I'll go with you. I lost that baby. And I'll never forget that doctor in the emergency room literally held my hand and, you know, said all the right things. And I'll never forget just looking over at my sister-in-law, like, look at what we've just been through and all this, you know, and she's just... So she asked all the right questions because I couldn't speak. She's like, so she's been on under a lot of stress. And he just said, no, nothing that you did or didn't do very, very good on my heart, the way he presented it. And he talked about what a miracle conception is, and what we all are, really, how many things have to go just right in order for a baby to make it, and just that something was probably wrong, and that's how our bodies handle it, so yeah, to go home and tell him that.
Yeah.
And I forgot to take my band off from the hospital. And so my friend looks at me and he's like,
yeah, what happened?
And so I told him, and oh my gosh, it's kind of a fog, but then again, I remember every little detail, and Brian just said, what do you want me to do? I'm sorry, and there's nothing that anyone can do. And then I still have this thing over my head that nobody knows. Nobody even knows this baby existed,
Yeah.
So slowly, over the next couple of weeks, we told our parents, and that's pretty much it. What is there to do, after it's gone? Told some close friends, and everybody just said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And I'm like, I know you didn't know, because I didn't tell you, because I wanted to surprise you. And
Yeah.
so that on its own pretty much did that alone.
Yeah.
He was there, obviously, he knows it happened. I think it's different for Mom anyway, and then to have him so just out of sorts and not 100%, just was, I don't know how I survived that on its own, let alone the timing of everything. And I couldn't help but think, what if I would have lost him too? What if I would have had to bury him and then this baby died? And obviously we are so lucky that isn't the case. But that's one thing that anyone who's been through it can tell you, never goes away. Like I told you, I cried about it last night. Cried myself to sleep about it. It's just a feeling that, and the things I would do different, I probably would have shouted it from the rooftops from the get-go. Just, I don't know, to have some support, and not that I didn't have it, it's just a different thing when someone doesn't even know that it exists, and now it's already come and gone. And
Okay, so looking back, how do you think that you were able to get through all of that and cope? You said you had a lot of support and a lot of people, but these are heavy struggles. So what do you think carried you through the most?
I think seeing first of all, his progress. I've said it 100 times already. He's just something else. He's just his progress, and the speed of that, all of that happening so quickly, definitely helped. His attitude helped, for sure, his positivity, and just, he kind of has this thing about him that he just doesn't really, not a lot bothers him, which is good, because I'm the opposite. And then just the things, the little blessings along the way, knowing that we weren't alone. You weren't alone, but you were at the same time. I had a client shortly after, and she had a long-term relationship with a gentleman who passed away of cancer, and it was a long fight with cancer. And the first time I saw her, she said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm okay." And she turned the chair and she just grabbed my shoulders, and she's like, "Don't lie to me. How are you doing?" She's like, "Don't forget that I've been here. I've been in a place where you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by help and support, but you're the loneliest person you've ever known." And that, she took the words. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's exactly how I felt, alone. Because I was the solid. And sometimes I was the punching bag. And someone who's recovering from brain injury, they deal with a lot of anger and other emotions, and that was all on me. 100% of the time, and I'm not always sure how I made it through that. His therapists were angels. There was one gal in particular that she was at the outpatient rehab, and she could tell it had been a rough morning getting him there, and she could just tell. She could see it all over my face, and she said to him, she said, we're going to get real for a minute, and she said, I'm not telling you this to scare you, I'm not telling you this to intimidate you, I just want you to be aware. She said, what do you, to him, she's asking this question, what do you think the divorce rate is in couples where one person suffers a brain injury? And he's like, I don't know, 20 or 30. And I can't remember the number, but it was high. It was above 80. And she told him that, and he looked at me, and he was just beside himself. And he talked about it for days.
So it woke him up.
Talked about it for days. And she said, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But you've both been through
a
lot. And you're living it in a different way that she's living it. And then she also said to him, and I'll never forget this, she said, tell me one thing that could be worse than what you're going through right now. And he said, I could be dead. And the way she explained it, she's like, yeah, but don't you think death is easy on you? Don't you think death is the easy way out? Because if you were dead, you wouldn't have to be here at therapy, which is what you're fighting with your wife about. And he's like, yeah, but not on her. It wouldn't be easy on her. And she's like, no, but for you. You could be being rolled in here in a wheelchair, with a bib on, with your wife wiping your slobber and feeding you with a spoon. You could be not walking ever again. There are a lot of things that could be worse than where you're at right now. And I hated to kind of put that guilt on him, but at the same time, he kind of needed that perspective. How lucky he was. So yeah, I feel like the people were placed where we needed them to. There were so many things that happened. I've touched on a couple of them, but things that were where they needed to be when they needed to be for a reason. And he had a friend pass away in 2013, so 2 years before this happened. Motorcycle accident that he died in. And Brian carried that very heavily and still to this day. They were childhood friends, and then kind of drifted, you grow up and do separate things, but there was always just a solid friendship there. And people have asked him since, do you remember seeing anything like, you hear people who go through like a near-death experience and they see a light or they see a face, and he says no. He's like, I can't remember anything like that, but I know Dane was there. I know that Dane carried me through that. And there were so many things that proved that. So many things. And you'll never convince him otherwise. You'll never convince him that Dane didn't have a hand in that. And then he deals with a lot of guilt with that too. Like survivor's guilt is the thing that I never understood before this happened. So we're staying in Idaho Falls. We spent a lot of time when I was growing up in Island Park, which I'm not sure the distance, 2 hours, maybe hour and a half away from each other. And there was a time when the hospital would kind of kick you out. You couldn't be there in shift change in the ICU. And so we would find ourselves just like trying to find something to do. That's when we would have dinner. And one night I said, let's just go to Target. And my mom's like, okay, what do you need? And I said, nothing. I don't know what else to do. So we literally wandered through Target aimlessly. And I look up and my mom is running to these people like this. I'm like, what is she doing? We were in Idaho. Like, this is... And I focus and I realize who it is. And it's these people that we spent so many years with in Island Park. They live in Island Park. And what the heck were they doing in Target in Idaho Falls at the same time that I'm here, know? And I just lost it. There had been minimal communication on Facebook about Brian's accident with this gal from Island Park, and she said, I didn't know you were here. I thought this happened at home in Utah. And anyway, what are the odds of that,
That's cool.
So many little things. So many little things like that. Shooting stars, billboards, there was this marquee on the hospital sign the night we were walking out. And I can't remember the exact words. I have a picture of it somewhere, but basically said, "You will get through this." There was one day we were spending some time outside, and in the hospital parking lot, there's a patch of grass, and there's beer cans, a pile of beer cans that somebody had left, and it was Dane's beer. It was what he always had. So we stayed in a hotel that first night, and then the hospital actually had this lot where you could park a trailer for free. So my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and brother-in-law brought their trailers up, and then I had a friend bring his up for me, and probably saved me thousands of dollars in hotel, and it felt like home, you know. So what a blessing that was. And it was parked in stall 11, I'll just say that. Again, I'm big on the numbers, yep. And I'll never forget when we went to leave, I'm like, has it been here that whole time? That sign that says 11? Yep, it sure has. My mom has friends that live in Idaho Falls, fishing friends of theirs. And she had said, if your daughter needs anything, just call. Literally 2 blocks. And so obviously I can shower in the trailer, but this hair washing in a trailer is not very fun. So one day I went there to shower, and I walked in. And this house is like, if I could pick my mom's house up and put it somewhere else, this house is exactly like my mom's. Layout, the bathroom, like I'm like, this is what I needed, you know, little, and that seems so silly, but
to feel at home though.
and they were I had never met them before. They were so kind and just welcoming, and they even offered to let me stay. And anyway, I could talk about this all day and never hit on every little thing like that happened, down to even before any of this happened, you know, me not going to the cabin, being home. There was an uncle that was up there when it happened, and then we have a bunch of friends up there, but one in particular, she has a cabin too, and you can't get service up there. You have to drive. There's a couple little spots that have little peaks of service, and she said, "Sammy, my phone rang." My phone rang at the cabin.
Oh, wow.
And she said, "We've never packed up so fast." And it would have been probably the next day when they came home, you know, that they would have found out. But anyway, little things like that.
How has this experience affected you and your husband's relationship?
So it's not something that I've really thought of, but I think he maybe found a new appreciation. Not for me, but for everybody. And obviously I fall into that category too. It's really hard for me that I'm so thankful he doesn't remember any of it, but that kind of brings, I don't want to say ignorance because he's not ignorant, but he can't relate. And that's been a challenge for sure. Every year that there's a discussion, are we going to go to the sand dunes? And I'm like, I'm not. And I hope I get there. I hope I can deal with it better. You know, he doesn't have the 4-wheeler anymore, a much safer machine. We're all strapped in, and it's fun for the kids. I hope to get there one day. But so I've had to learn to kind of understand that he doesn't remember. It's not that he's being insensitive. He doesn't remember what I went through. He doesn't know what he went through. I think it hits him when he looks at pictures and stuff. He's like, oh my gosh. I'll never forget one day when he was home, because he was off for a time, obviously. I came home and he was on the laptop and he had found all these pictures, and I'm like, how do you feel? I was nervous for him to see those. And he's like, well, I guess it makes it more real, and it does. And seeing the pictures I'm thankful that I have them. And it depends on my mood. Sometimes it takes me back, and makes it really hard. Sometimes it doesn't, but definitely brought us closer for sure. I've always known what I had, you know, and I've always known that he was special, and so I guess for me, it just kind of solidified that. Not only is he special to me, he's to see the way that people came together for him. It was good for me to see that other people see what I see too. So definitely brought us closer. There have been some struggles for sure. I'm really lucky though. A lot of brain injury patients, they completely lose a lot of their own personality, and a lot of them develop anger issues, and if we've been so lucky to not have any of that, I think a lot of that would have played a very much more negative part, and we've been so lucky to not. So I think probably just a new appreciation for each other is the best thing that has come from it, and it's a constant thing. It's a constant learning thing. It got brought up last night how he's like, honey, I know what you went through was hard, but I wasn't there, you know. And it's a lot of loneliness for sure, but he knows that, and it's taken a lot of patience from him too to help get me through that without knowing what happened, you know.
He probably has a new respect for you.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. And for his brother too. I think that they've always had a good relationship, always. But when someone's near death right in front of you, it changes a lot of things. And so I would say they're probably closer, but it's just kind of an unspoken thing of, you helped get me through that, and you helped my wife get through it, and the whole family just kind of had to lean on each other, and yeah, so I would say a new respect for sure, because we've known people that you go through things, and you know, you bring up the divorce rate, and that's a scary thing, and I hate to say this like this, it would take a lot. It would take a lot to break us for sure. But at the same time, we've been very lucky with what's come of it. So
the other percentage, whether it was 80 or whatever percent that divorced, the other percentage,
I wish I could remember,
probably gets stronger.
Yeah,
much
that's how
stronger.
I feel. That's how I feel for sure. And then the miscarriage on top of it. I'll never forget when I got pregnant with Bodhi, and we go to the doctor and they say how many pregnancies, and I say this is my second, and he's like, I know that, I just didn't live that with you.
Isn't there?
Yeah. So I think there's an appreciation there that's probably unspoken too. And he tells me all the time, I'm sorry that I don't remember, and it's nothing you can be sorry for, but definitely tough stuff though, for sure. But yeah, I would be lying if I said there hasn't been fights and hard moments, but all in all, grand scheme of things, definitely brought us closer, for sure. For sure.
And so when you look back on all of it, first, before I ask that question, I want to know, how is his health now?
He's good.
He's good now?
I would dare say 100%. He's definitely mouthy. That filter's still a little loose, and he can talk, especially if it's someone that he knows.
Oh, good.
He can talk and talk and talk and talk, and a lot of the time he'll get done talking and he'll be like, I don't know why I told you all that, but and which is a brain injury thing too, but he's good. Everything internally held up. He's good. I'll always worry, you know. I'll never forget when he went back to work. I said, I feel like I just sent my kid to kindergarten. Can you keep an eye on him? Like, I know this sounds so silly, but you think about the smallest things.
Yeah.
Like, what if he gets in a car wreck on the way to work now? You know. But he's good. Yeah.
How long do you think it was from the time of the accident to like feeling like, okay, he's good?
It probably was really shorter than what I felt like it was. And the effects that he still has, it's nothing was pretty quick. I would say 6 months, which is nothing compared to
to
what
but it
people
is something.
deal with.
Than 6 months.
Yeah. So he was off. He went back to work in November, which was probably a little soon. He definitely, I wouldn't say bullied, but he definitely bribed his therapist to sign him off quicker than he probably should. And he'll even tell you that now. He's like, I probably should have just took more advantage of the time off. That's another blessing, another wonderful thing that, you know, he works for the government and they have a leave donation program. So he's always been on top of his leave anyway. So he had a pretty good amount when it happened. And then they opened it up and, God, I can't remember the numbers, but it's well over 200 hours of leave that were donated to him. And luckily it went back to the people. You don't use it, I guess it goes back to the people that donated it, which is amazing. But he'll tell you, he's like, I kind of wish I would have just chilled for another minute longer. I probably could have rested longer. But all in all, it's okay. But his processing, you can watch his wheels turn. It just takes him a little bit longer to understand things. But the more time goes on, the more it's, and I'm probably just used to it, but the more time goes on, the more non-existent it is. You know, just not an issue. Now having Bodhi in school and even going to doctor's appointments and stuff, sometimes he'll ask questions that were already answered, and I'm just like, okay, we'll go over this when we get in the car. We're good. We can carry on. But really, what is that? That's nothing. You know?
It's something you can deal with.
Yeah. And everybody, obviously, random people we meet don't know, but everybody that knows him knows that that's just a part of him now, you know?
Looking back at this entire experience, what are the blessings that have come from it? Or are there? Yeah, countless. Countless. So, obviously all those little things that happened during that time. His health. Every doctor that came in, therapist that came in, they kept saying, he's young, he'll be good, he's a fighter. And that never rang, I never understood that, but I just think we're resilient when we're, you know, he wasn't going to quit. He wasn't gonna take no for an answer, and that's a big thing. I think his determination played a big part. He had a grandpa that was literally his cheerleader. I think about grandpa back in those days, and he wanted to show off for grandpa. When grandpa was there and therapy was happening, he was going above and beyond. So yeah, his motivation, determination, these babies, you know, there was a lot of question after losing that first one, you know, is this just going to be my life? Is this, because many women deal with that forever, you know, am I ever going to be able to carry, and not knowing what his effects, you know, possibly reproduction would be from the accident. And my gosh, we've just been so lucky to get pregnant fairly easy and have healthy babies, you know, because that was a big question. That was a big question for a long time, not knowing. That was another part of what made that miscarriage so hard. What if that was it? You know, what if he can't have kids? And luckily none of that was affected. And but yeah, definitely brought us closer together. I look at these boys, and Brian used to say all the time, why me? Why did I live? But I just look at these boys, and that's the only explanation I have. And I don't know why we've been so lucky, but we have. Super thankful. The blessings that have come over it, I would just say, our health and just the bond, you know, the good relationship that we had from the get-go. And it sounds so silly when I say it out loud, but I've known from day one. I've known that this was solid, you know. I've known that, because there's a lot of things that have, and not just this accident, but a lot of things put in your way to tear you apart. And
And we're just not doing it. We're just not giving up. So, and we've not even gotten close, really. Like, we've just, so that's a blessing too, that we've been able to grow together. And I used to think that when we were young. I used to think, as he went into his 20s and then I followed after, I thought you go through a lot of changes in that time. Growth, personal growth, and hopefully we just do it together. But these next few years will probably be telling, and it's true. We did just grow together. So, other than that, I think just the chance to finish this story, you know, and that's something that I felt deeply on that day when it happened. I'm like, this is not how he, even though I truly knew something would happen. I knew, but I didn't know when, I didn't know how bad, but I knew when it happened. I was pretty confident this wasn't it, and I never said it. Nobody ever said it to me. Nobody had ever said out loud, you know, what if he doesn't make it, or, and I never said it. I never said it during that time, you know, what am I going to do? And it just wasn't even, kind of wasn't an option, I guess you could say. So.